everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Premier Education Program mini-series, Whodunit, a Presidential Investigation. This is brought to you by the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library and Museum. We are so excited to be highlighting one of our premier education programs and walking you through how to utilize this program with your students today. Before we get started, I want to highlight the resource guide and let you know that my name is Jenny Gaona. Here's my picture right here. Instead of you watching me talk about the program, I'm actually going to be accessing the materials so you can see what they look like, and I am going to be going through some ideas of how you could be incorporating these materials and these resources with your students. Before I get started, org website, hover over the Education tab, click on Premier Programs, and this is where you will find all of the resources. Today we're focusing on the Whodunit, a Presidential Investigation, but there are multiple programs housed in this section of the bush41.org website. If you'll notice on the Whodunit, a Presidential Investigation, there is an elementary version and there is a secondary version. So each of these programs were written with the elementary and secondary standards in mind. Another resource I wanted to highlight for you is the Passport for Learning. The great thing about the Passport for Learning, it's an extension and the backbone of all of our premier education programs at the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library and Museum. It focuses on the pillars to live by that we felt demonstrated the service of George H.W. Bush. For example, his lifetime of service, putting people first in decision making, and building relationships to better the world. You'll see pieces of these and you'll be referenced to them in each education program. So I just wanted to give you a heads up that those materials are based in the Passport. There are also some great activities in the Passport that have to deal with the Constitution, the goals of the Constitution, principles of the Constitution, powers of the President and the executive branch, how a bill becomes a law, and then some specific information about George H.W. Bush. The next thing I want to talk about in the Passport, and this is what it looks like if you access it. Professionally done. The visuals are fantastic. At the very end of the Passport, something I want to bring to your attention are the apps that have been created by the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library and Museum. Each app has standard connections, your elementary and secondary standards. So if you can use these in class and actually connect them to your lesson plan based on these standards. You have the QR code to download the apps, and then a little description for each one. So if you wanted your students to have some time to actually do some social studies, but in a fun, interactive way, these apps are a great resource for teachers. And once again, you can find those in the Passport for Learning. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the Whodunit, a Presidential Investigation program, and explain how this program is put together and how you could use it with your students. Each of the premier programs that were created for the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library and Museum have the exact same layout. So all of this is consistent, whether it's an elementary program or secondary program. So in the first page, you will find the objective to the program. For the Whodunit, it's for students to analyze primary sources to determine who was President of the United States during the time of the described event. So I love this program because it allows students to really deep dive into primary sources and use their historical investigation skills to figure out which president it belongs with. They'll be analyzing images and texts, quotes, letters, lots of different things for them to get more involved in social studies. The topic is Leaders of the United States. It's going to be looking at primary resources from George H.W. Bush, Abraham Lincoln, and President George Washington in the elementary version, and then we add 3 more presidents for the secondary version. For your elementary social studies standards, here are the standards that are tied into that. The next page is the Educator's Guide. So what this page does for you is it lists all of the program materials. So if you need to make copies, you know exactly what you need. You can look for them here, go to those pages. And then it gives you an idea of how to have students interact with these materials in class. So if you need a little mini lesson plan, you can go to the program instructions and use this as a resource. Another thing that's been included in all of the program is a student skills assessment. So we call that our bottom line. This allows you as a teacher to see, how did the students do? Are they taking away what you wanted them to take away from the program? The next page has pieces that connect with the Passport for Learning. So, and specifically to George H.W. Bush's pillars to live by. So here are those pillars to live by right here: lifetime of service, putting people first in decision making, and building relationships to better the world. So at the end of each program, if you wanted kids as an extension to give you an example of how did this activity demonstrate that George H.W. Bush gave a lifetime of service. Did you see any service opportunities from this activity? So this is where your students can make that connection. This is the same thing, but now we've given you sort cards. So if you wanted to do a sticky note activity, you then have each pillar to do that, because we wanted to make sure the activities were as interactive as possible. The next one is your security briefing. If you wanted to do these activities as a station for your students, then this could be instructions they would have with them. So you have little program instructions right there, key vocabulary. So these are some words that we picked out that students may or may not know. That way they would be good to go if they came across these words during the primary sources. The next page, and this honestly is probably my most favorite part of each program, and it is George Bush's top secret letter. So what they do with this is your hook. This is how you get them excited for their activity. So it's a letter written from George H.W. Bush that you could then have students find in your classroom. They could do their own investigation to find it, or you could just read it out loud, post it on the board. So for today, I'm going to read it to you so you understand what their task is and how this looks like it's a top secret letter from the White House. It's not. What we've done is we've taken the formatting of a top secret letter, but then we've done our own task within it as far as from George H.W. Bush. So disclaimer, this is not an original primary source document. This is purely for these education programs. So here we go. Subject: the success of the United States is dependent on you, the people. My fellow Americans, we need your help. The George H.W. Bush Presidential Library Museum is creating a new exhibit highlighting the military service of presidents of the United States. They received quotes, letters, and visuals from all over the nation. Unfortunately, my dog Sully ran through the office and mixed up all of the primary sources from these great American presidents. I need your help. Investigate these primary sources to determine which president they best belong. Now remember, a great investigator justifies their answer with facts from the source. Make sure to pay close attention to any clues the primary source might give you. I have provided a quick review for you to look over before you begin your investigation. Thank you for your service to our country. Good luck. The future of our nation is in your hands. Sincerely, George Bush. So this makes it feel a little more official, like they're getting instructions from the president as far as their task and what they're doing. We wanted it to be engaging and fun to get students hooked into the activity. And then with the resources, we always provide you with kind of an answer key to go along with it. So here are the primary source materials, some of the letters and speeches, quotes, and a little blurb about George H.W. Bush. Every president we chose for this activity had military experience and then became a president during time of war. So that was our reasoning in who we chose for these activities. And then we give them a way to analyze these primary sources. So after they look at these quotes, what president do they think they best belong, and then they have to justify their answers. Once again, here's our connection to the passport of learning with the pillars of service for George H.W. Bush. And this is our bottom line. Remember, our bottom line is the assessment to see what students learned and are taking away after they've analyzed these primary sources. So you have the presidents in the middle, and then you have text and visuals, and what they have to do is label each piece of information with the president they best fit. And because we love you, teachers, we also provided an answer key to go along with that. Okay, now I'm going to dig in a little bit deeper to the materials the students are going to have. For the elementary version for Whodunit, like I said, we have 3 presidents. This is the president review. So these are one of the pages that you would give your students before they start analyzing the primary sources. There's a page for President George H.W. Bush, one for Lincoln, and one for George Washington. So what it does, it gives them some background information on their military service, when they served as President of the United States, and then it gives you a little bit more detail about the war or conflict that was happening while they were president. So a little bit of background information. Then what you have is you have 3 pages of primary resource materials. So this first page is visuals and images. You can do these in steps. So if I wanted to have my students do all of the visuals first, I check them, be like, that's correct. Let's leave those with your presidents. Now let's see if you can move on to the next piece, which would be quotes. So here are the visuals that students would analyze. There are 3 for each president. Let's let you look at those a little bit. Now remember, they have to justify their answer. So they would have to explain why they feel this image best goes with George Washington. And they can use basic clues. So for this one on the bottom right of George H.W. Bush signing legislation, a clue could be, it's not a painting, it's a photograph. So that would be a good historical reference. When you see materials that are only paintings, it's probably because they're pre-photography. That'll give you a little bit of idea of date. Okay, the second resource they can access are quotes. So these are quotes that were pulled from each of the 3 presidents. You can leave the date on there or you can cross it out. It's totally up to you on how difficult you want this activity to be. But once again, there are 3 quotes from each president that the students would analyze and decide which president they best fit and justify their answers. And the last one, this is probably my favorite, are letters or speeches. What I think is great about these resource cards is, number one, we're embedding our literacy, which we need as much literacy as we can get, but also they're not easy. So, my dear General, and then it's from Lafayette. Well, based on all 3 of our presidents that we chose have military experience, you can't rule any of them out. So they have to look for specific information within the letter. So it's not from any of the presidents or 2, or if it is, it's here, Dear Mother and Dad, and then signed by Pop, right? So this is from George H.W. Bush, but they're going to have to kind of dig in, and this is when he wrote while he was serving in the military. So that they'd have to get some clues from this letter to connect it to George H.W. Bush. And the last one is a speech from Lincoln. So it gives the speech, Gettysburg Address, and the date. But they have to dig in. The key words here would be Civil War to understand with Lincoln. So I love the letters and speeches. I love those primary sources. And once again, this is those primary source materials, who they connect to. There's Washington's. And here's an example of the analysis sheet. So you see we have the letters and speeches. You have the presidents up here. They have to label what president they think fits best with the letter and speech, and then explain that connection. What were some key words, or what were their clues for their investigation? This is the quotes analysis sheet, similar formatting. And then last but not least, here is the images. So there's a analysis sheet for each of the primary sources. And I've already shown you the bottom line. This is their assessment piece to match the presidents with the information or visuals. So that is the elementary Whodunit program. Now I'm going to bump over to the secondary program to explain the differences. The instructions and basic idea of the Whodunit program at the secondary level is exactly the same as elementary, but what we've done is we have increased the amount of precedents and therefore increased the amount of primary source materials for students to analyze. We bumped it up a couple notches. So the presidents we added were James Madison, Harry Truman, and last but not least, Dwight Eisenhower. So instead of 3 presidents for the elementary version, students are now analyzing 6 presidents. Also, feel free to modify this as needed. So if you're a middle school teacher, maybe you want to include James Madison, but not Truman or Eisenhower. So feel free to kind of use your grade level and what you think is appropriate for your kids to modify this activity as you need to. So instead of having 1 page of visuals, now that we have added 3 more presidents, you will see a second page of visuals for students to analyze and match with the correct president. Instead of 1 page of quotes, we now have 2. So they're having to analyze more text. I like the quotes because they're short, so kids don't get as frustrated reading since they're shorter chunks. And then instead of having the 3 letters and speeches, we now have 3 more. And you can see one is very fancy. The analysis sheets are similar. They just have more materials on them to address all 6 presidents. Here is the primary source analysis sheet for the quotes. And last but not least, here's the one for the images. The goal is the same from the elementary program, is we want them to explain what clues they utilized to put the image with the president they think fits best. How did they know? How did they figure that out? What explain their thinking to justify their answers? And just like in the elementary program, we have your key. So here's Dwight D. Eisenhower's key, his military experience, his quotes, and his speech. Last but not least, the bottom line looks a little bit different because we have way more information. So you have your presidents down the middle. You have images on the right and text on the left. So students would have to label each piece of information and each of the images with the president they think fits best. And like I said, because we love you, of course we have the answer key in the next page. So that is the Whodunit secondary version in both programs. Something I do want to tell you, if you don't have your students face to face, if you are going to possibly be utilizing these programs virtually, I would highly recommend for this PDF, if you have this Kami extension for your students where you can upload PDFs and then your students can interact with these activities. So I just drew, sorry, there we go. So I can do this activity and make connections. I know I'm on the answer key. I wouldn't do that yeah, there we go. Let me do Washington is here. So your students can actually fill out the activity virtually if you do not have them face to face through different technology tools. That way your kids can still interact with the materials. So that is our Whodunit program. All of the resources in the Facebook Live have been shared in the comments section, so please feel free to access those. I'm going to go over one more time where you can find some of these materials. If I'm in the George H.W. Bush, bush41.org, I hover over the Education tab, click on Premier Programs, and that will give you access to download all of the PDFs. So you have access to these programs. They are free and available to all teachers. So you have access to them at any time. And also, if you like this program, please feel free to check out any of the other programs that have been created by the George H.W. Bush Presidential Library Museum. They All of them, if you want to read little blurbs on them, they are up there and ready for you to use. If you would like to access this resource guide, which to me is a little help as far as teacher programs, my apologies for that beep, and how you could utilize some of this information, you can find this resource guide in the comment section, but you can also find it if you go over the Education tab, Storytelling Programs, and there we go, the Whodunit and the resource guide is right there for download. Well, I think we are, I made it in our 20-minute window. I hope this gave you an outline of how you could utilize this program with your students. It is a wealth of primary resources that have been collected for you and packaged so that your students can interact with them and also have fun doing it. Before I sign off, I want to give a big thanks to Shirley Hammond and Ivy Mistrovich for partnering with me in order to create these programs for the George H.W. Bush Library, Presidential Library Museum. They care about teachers. We appreciate all of the hard work that teachers are doing. We wish you all the best in what you're doing with your students. Keep up the hard work. We see you, and we think you're doing a great job. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and we will get those answered and back to you as soon as we possibly can. Have a fabulous day, and hopefully we'll see you again for our next program. We will be doing Bush News in a month. So we'll be doing another Facebook Live. Feel free to join us, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.